Okay, so if you have a younger kid and they're showing some of these signs, just kind of keep your radar open. Okay, so first of all, kids who are dyslexic have no concept of time. Okay, absolutely no concept of time. So keep that in mind. They're also unable to follow 2 to 3 step directions, but y'all, so do a lot of other little kids, right? It's a developmental thing, but we're talking about really have trouble with it. All right, they usually learn to talk a little bit later, and so if your kid had a lower or slower development with speech or had to get speech therapy, just keep your antenna up. Okay. They have a hard time remembering simple, not simple things, but things that routine things like the name of shapes and the name of colors and the name of like certain animals and stuff. They just have a hard time capturing vocabulary that other kids their age may not have issues with. Okay. Not only do they reverse letters and numbers, but they reverse syllables and they reverse whole words. Like sometimes they'll read was as saw. Okay, so it's sometimes like whole words or whole sentences. All right, they're unable to recognize or produce rhymes. They don't get rhyming. So when you're trying to use word families with them, like cat, sat, rat, mat, and you have the word family at, and all they have to do is replace the first sound, and they can't do it, and they have to constantly sound out the whole thing each and every time. And keep your antenna up, okay? They don't like rhyming. They don't get rhyming. Dr. Seuss makes no sense to them, okay? And they also have a hard time remembering things in a sequence. Like, for instance, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Friday always comes after Thursday, okay? But they have trouble remembering that and remembering the months in order and things like that, okay? And sometimes they also have a delay in fine motor skills, like tying their shoes and writing with a pencil, okay? These are some signs, but also keep in mind, this can describe a kid who is in that younger age of 5, 6, 7, and 8. All I'm saying is keep your antenna up. Okay, so if your kid is in middle school and he's still showing all of those signs that we talked about a minute ago, plus a couple of other things, like for instance, they might be reading, but it's slow, it's inaccurate. They're constantly replacing words. They're guessing on what a word might be. They might just totally skip words, right? Especially the smaller ones and the prepositions, right? So if they look at the word the one day and they know it, and the next day they insist they've never seen that word before. So they have trouble with sight words, prepositions like under and to and things like that. They just have a hard time with those, and so sometimes they just skip them. Okay, so keep that in mind. They also use context clues instead of actually sounding words out, and that's because it takes so long to process a word, to decode it each and every time, that they have trouble remembering what they read before that, right? So they rather just look at context clues and pictures and go from there, all right? Poor spelling, it's very phonetic, poor handwriting, having trouble getting words out on a page. That's why dysgraphia tends to go with dyslexia, and I do a whole session on dysgraphia, so make sure you listen to that, okay? Like I said, they have trouble telling time. They have no time management. They have no idea of time, no concept of time, okay? But trying to tell time on not a digital clock, but an analog clock, they have a really hard time with that, okay? They have trouble memorizing math facts, but it's mainly because of that memorizing of sequential things, and kids with dyslexia also have trouble with executive functioning skills, so that tends to go along with memorizing. Their short-term memory is it's a little bit lacking. All right, let's just kind of say that. They are hesitant in their speech, like I said. They're always trying to capture what they want to say, and they have trouble finding a word for that. They're extremely messy, so their bedrooms, their backpacks, all that kind of stuff is going to be crazy. It might be organized to them, but it looks like total chaos to us, mainly because kids who are dyslexic often tend to be ADHD, or kids who are ADHD might also be dyslexic. So sometimes that's just both of them, okay? And of course, they dread doing schoolwork, and they will do anything and everything to get out of it, because when they're doing it, they often are beating themselves up on the inside and calling themselves stupid, even though we know they're highly intelligent. Sometimes, a lot of times, they're not feeling that way. All right, let's talk about those high schoolers. So again, if they're exhibiting all of the signs we talked about and they're well into their high school years and they're still showing some of those things, your antennas should be really up by this point, okay? But they're going to show those signs, plus they're going to have difficulty usually processing auditory information. So like if you give them directions or you tell them to go do something and you give them several steps and it's all auditory and not written down, they're going to have a hard time at that. They lose their possessions all the time. Like I said, their organizational skills are not that great. It's this executive functioning thing that's going on, okay? They might be able to read at this point, but they're really slow and their comprehension is really low if they have to read it themselves. If things are read to them, they're able to comprehend a whole lot more, but their reading is slower, okay? They also have difficulty remembering not just the sequence of things, but people's names and stuff like that, okay? So they constantly are saying, you know, that place we went and that thing we did, and what was that guy's name again? So they're constantly having trouble capturing words and names for things, okay? They also have a hard time organizing their ideas to write on paper if they actually have to write it. However, if you give them some accommodations, writing's not a problem. So make sure you listen to my session on dysgraphia later on, okay? They also have trouble reading music. They may be musically inclined, but they do it by ear. So reading music can be difficult, or learning a foreign language can be very difficult for them, okay? And they also have trouble with their self-esteem, but we talked about that. That's mainly because even though we're not calling them stupid and we know that they're extremely intelligent, they're not feeling that way. All right, so if your kid is showing any of these signs, take a chill pill. Don't worry. I want you to come back for part 2. I'm going to be talking about what to do about it and things that you can check to see if maybe it's just an eye tracking thing or if it is just an age development thing. But come back for part 2 for that. Make sure you join me today for a live with Erica Johns at How to Homeschool. I'm going to be doing a giveaway there as well. Make sure you go to my website, coffeewithcarrie.org, so that you can schedule a one-on-one coffee date with me or listen to my podcast, Coffee with Carrie Homeschool Help. I talk about anything and everything that has to do with homeschooling. And make sure you follow some of the other speakers that are also talking at the TikTok Homeschool Conference this May. All right, I'll see you in part 2.